What is going on, guys? And just like the title implies, I did sell my Sony ZV-1. Now, I'm not going to be replacing it with the Mark II, nor will I be replacing it with the Sony ZV-1F or the ZV-E1. I'm pretty much done with all of the ZV lineups. Now, with that being said, there's nothing wrong with the Sony ZV lineup. They're a great camera, especially the ZV-1 and the ZV-1F. Now, the ZV-E10 and the ZV-E1, those are a little bit different cameras than the regular ZV lineup. And although they're technically in the ZV lineup, I don't really consider them the same cameras. But I'm not going to get too much into that. I did go to Best Buy and I did do a little bit of some camera shopping, but they didn't have the camera that I wanted. So, if you're not subscribed to my channel, please think about hitting that subscribe button. That way you can watch that video when I drop it. And I'll talk a little bit more about the camera that I wanted to buy, but they don't have. Won't have for a while at least. So the reason why I got rid of my Sony ZV-1 is I've always had a two-camera system, and it didn't really bother me having one camera with multiple lenses and then just one with fixed lenses. Up until I think about a year ago or so. So for those that are new to my channel, the FX30 is my main camera now, but before I had the FX30, I actually had the Sony a6400 as well as the Sony ZV-1, and that's kind of how I had that for a while. And I only really had one lens that I kind of used for that camera, and that was primarily the lens that I have now on my FX30, which is the Sigma 16mm f1.4. Now since then, with the FX30, I actually bought another lens, which is the Sony 11mm f1.8. Now, I went on vacation to VidCon this last month or so, and I found myself, when I brought my ZV-1 with me along with my FX30, that I didn't really use it as much as I thought I was going to, because it's a small compact camera, and it was, it is the kind of nice camera to take with you, especially if you're going on long vacations. I know a lot of other YouTubers have smaller cameras that they bring with them, and although I'm up for that kind of gear, I just for some reason just didn't really use it as much as I did with the FX30 paired with my 11mm f1.8. So I found myself wanting another camera that I could use as an interchangeable lens, so that I can have my FX30 with my Sigma and then my next camera with the Sony 11mm. Now, I've always loved buying lenses, and the reason why I don't want to buy the Sony ZV-E1 is it's a full frame version of my ZV-1, just a lot more expensive. Not to mention, when it comes to buying lenses for those cameras, now I'm buying into two sets of lenses, APS-C sensor lenses, which is what my FX30 runs, and then the full frame equivalent of that, whatever that would be, for the full frame camera. And I don't really want to spend that kind of money on it, because even for just normal talking head videos, most of the lenses that I've seen are still pretty pricey, and there are a lot of third-party options for those full frame lenses, but even those are still kind of a little bit beyond what I want to spend, whereas where I already have a APS-C censored camera, so I'm going to keep along the lines of buying APS-C censored camera. Otherwise, the camera is a solid camera. It does 4K at 30. I believe it also does 60, but I think it's only 30. It also does 1080 at 30, 60, and I believe you can do slow rate. I believe you can do down to 120. If you want to do some slow motion videos, you can do that. Now, in terms of compactability wise, it's really not too bad. Like I said, it's a compact camera that gives you everything that you would get in a normal camera without having to swap out the lenses. Now, the closest competitor to it, excluding the ZV Mark II version, would be the Sony ZV-1F. Now, the only difference between these two is that the Sony ZV-1F does have a wider field of view, whereas the Sony ZV-1 does not. But despite the differences between that, that's really the only differences I could see between the two, and it wasn't really something I wanted to buy and basically buy the same camera, just less expensive, but does the same thing. I really want to do and get into different types of lens comparisons, and I do love watching a lot of YouTubers who do a lot of these lens reviews, because it helps people like me who are still may not do some of the same things that they do in terms of like photography and cinematography and all of that. But for like talking head videos like this, there are so many different options of lenses. There's like basically an infinite amount of choices, but you don't want to spend a lot of money on a lens that you probably use like once or twice, and then, you know, buy another lens. So for instance, when I went to VidCon, I brought my 16 millimeter and my 11 millimeter. And surprisingly, I didn't really use the 16 millimeter as much as I used the 10 millimeter because I was constantly out of the hotel room and I was vlogging. And although the 16 millimeter is not a heavy lens, when you have it paired with this camera, it does add a little bit of weight. And that's even when I'm just using a simple, just handheld tripod. It does tend to add a little bit of weight to it, and that was something I just didn't want. Whereas with the 11 millimeter, it was practically, it didn't even feel like it was even on there. Plus, I kind of like the open wide view of the 11 millimeter on this camera when I'm doing vloggings outside because it's an ultra wide lens, as opposed to just using a 60 millimeter and then just trying to vlog with that outside. Now, I'm not saying you can't do that. It's just not something I like to do with this lens. That's why I bought the 11 millimeter Sony. Otherwise, it's an amazing camera, and if anyone was looking to buy their first vlogging camera, I would highly recommend the ZV-1 or even the ZV-1F. It is slightly cheaper at around $500 versus you spending $750. And like I said, the only differences that I could see between the two is that the ZV-1F does have a slightly wider field of view, whereas the ZV-1 does not. Otherwise, when it comes to active stabilization, if you're shooting at 4K, it does tend to crop, and that's whether you're using the ZV-1F or the ZV-1 because of the sensor size. So if you do love shooting in 4K on these cameras, just be aware that it will crop in on you. Otherwise, like I said, it's a solid performing camera, but for where I'm at in my YouTube channel and where I'm going, that camera just isn't going to suit me anymore. So I'm really looking for another camera that allows me to add a lens to it. That way, if I ever wanted to do lens comparisons between the two, I have two cameras that I can actually do that with, as opposed to just having to swap out my lens every time I want to do a lens review. And I've done that before with other lenses than I had when I had my A6400. Didn't particularly care much for that. I just didn't like having to stop, pull it out, grab the other one, put it back in, make sure it was in focus, do all that, and then I really didn't want to do all that. So that is why I got rid of the Sony ZV-1, is because I am looking to buy another APS-C censored camera that does allow me to swap out lenses. Now, I did go to Best Buy, I did do some camera shopping, and I'll have that video posted sometime next week. So if you're not subscribed to my channel, please think about hitting the subscribe button. That way you don't miss that video when I drop it. And then when I do get the camera that I want, I'll do an unboxing of that, and I'll probably have a new lens before that. Otherwise, that's all that I just want to talk about. Again, if you want to take a look at my reviews on the Sony ZV-1, I'll drop a link down below so you can take a look at all the videos I've done on it. Again, it's an amazing camera. It's just that I've kind of outgrown it and what it is capable of doing. I have my Insta360 X3, which can kind of take place of the Sony ZV-1 because it's just an action camera, and I'm not really doing a lot with it, but I can do some of the same things with these Insta360 X3 that I did with the Sony ZV-1. So again, take a look at those videos that I did on the Sony ZV-1. It's an amazing camera, and that's all that I got for you guys today. And again, I want to thank everybody for watching. Again, if you're new to my channel, please think about hitting that subscribe button. If this video was helpful, please give me a thumbs up, as these likes do help me create better content, and stay tuned for my next video. And I will see you guys later. Enjoy your summer.